listening to the Film Monsters Podcast with Nate and Ray.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a sadly little less spooky episode of the Film Monsters Podcast. I'm Nate.
And I am a very upset Ray because I realized that we only did 4 episodes on the Halloween season.
Yes, we only did 4 episodes, but technically, if you think about it, today's episode kind of dips its toe into the Halloween season. And as of Ray and I recording this episode, it's not yet Halloween. But by the time you listen to the episode, it will already have been Halloween. So Ray and I still have a little bit of excitement left and a little bit of, pizzazz and ready to eat some candy and soak in the season. Despite the fact that, for you all out there, it's already been gone and you're already in that depressive state.
Here's the thing I hate about Halloween. It's like, I love Halloween so much, but I know I only have those 24 hours with it. Like, I've been like just savoring that moment for it to arrive, and then it arrives, and then I was like, oh man, I'm sad. I only get 24 hours of this.
I will say I'm proud of myself this year because I feel like comparatively to years before, I watched so many horror movies this month. I think it was probably the most I've ever crammed into a month, and it's been really cool. Like, I feel like I've been in the spirit so much this year, and that's been great. And we hope that with the 31 Wax Hauntings challenge that we did and how we've been engaging about the Halloween season, that you guys too out there have felt that same like spirit of the season that Ray and I have been feeling.
Yeah, that's been super fun to be able to see that, and to be able to just see what people have been shared, and it was fun. And like I said, for me, it's been the same. Like, my Halloween spirit has been at an all-time high this year, for sure. And yeah, I'm excited. I feel like by the time Halloween is over, it'll be kind of like that moment of Nightmare Before Christmas, like 364 days left for next Halloween.
I think of that scene every single time when Halloween's over. But I do enjoy the Christmas season, and I'm sure Ray and I will have at least one episode dedicated to discussing Christmas movies, because I don't know if you feel the same way as me, Ray, but Christmas brings me a collective joy that's a little less than Halloween, but I still love the Christmas season.
Oh, no, 100% I still love the Christmas season as well. No dogs against Christmas. It's just people need to cool it and calm down and wait to put Christmas post-Halloween.
Speaking of things that we love, I wanted to bring this up, and this article came out a couple of days ago, but I was interested in talking to you about it, Ray, because our focus has been so heavy on Halloween that I haven't really had the opportunity to bring this up, and I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on it. But I don't know if you saw, but as on October the 20th, so it's been about a week since it came out, Criterion laid off 20% of its staff, and they said it's a part of a reorganization move. They're trying to restructure themselves as a business, and I read a couple of articles about it, and it's weird to me because I feel like Criterion is such like a big thing, and that this passion for film and restoring film, and typically with the sales it seems like they do really well, but it makes me wonder, are they struggling with sales? Is it something that we're going to have to worry about? What exactly is the reorganization going to be? And I was just kind of curious as to if you'd heard about this or what your perspective is on it, because obviously we're both two people who love Criterion so much, and we want this to exist for a really long time. We're both really heavy advocates for physical media, and I was just curious as to if you'd heard about it or what your perspective is on it.
I have heard about it, and at first it was that worrisome feeling of this feeling of uncertainty that you're not sure what's happening, obviously nervousness about what that may entail. But then I remember that at one point Criterion used to be called, I believe it was Janus Films.
Yeah, and they still have the logos beforehand. Mm-hmm.
They still have the logos beforehand. So I feel like, just like that, Janus went to Criterion Collection. I feel like it was a rebranding, and I'm wondering if this is kind of going in a similar direction. I mean, if you notice, another company that went through something similar recently was Mondo being bought out by Funko. So, I mean, at first there was some, skepticism and reluctance towards a company like Mondo, getting bought out by Funko, but it ended up being a better situation because now there's better distribution for Mondo. So I like to think that Criterion is headed in a direction where maybe they'll be able to have better distribution. I don't know, maybe more catalogs for them to pick up, them taking more risks on smaller films. I don't know. I like to think it's for something like that, but obviously there is that thought process in the back of my mind of what does this really mean for the future of Criterion, especially with them just making the jump to 4K. Kind of makes you wonder.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you completely. And then I would think, too, like, if we want to bring it into the conversation, if you think about it this way, like, they just picked up Wall-E, and they've got this partnership with Disney now, which makes me think that, you know, like, if a company is diving in to where they are signing a Disney movie and that there's a potential for more Disney movies to be added into the collection later on, that to me would think that the company isn't struggling and that maybe it is just a restructuring to where they want the company to operate differently. Maybe they've like phased out some of the jobs that aren't necessarily as important. And hopefully for the future, especially for people like Ray and I who are physical media lovers, that this isn't like a bad sign that people don't want Criterion releases, because I was actually watching a new Criterion film today. I still have to finish it, called Cure. That was just absolutely phenomenal. And Criterion has introduced me to so many films, as I'm sure, Ray, they've introduced you to a lot of films that you'd never seen before. And it would really just be heartbreaking to see, like, you know, a dip in films that they add to the collection or like a lack in quality or something. But I'm hopeful that that's not the case.
Yeah, I'm hopeful as well. I hope that this is just like I keep doing the comparison to Mondo because everyone was really nervous about the Mondo being bought out by Funko, but it seems to be being a really good, like a really good partnership. It's been kind of nice to see these Mondo titles come in stock and not selling out in 30 seconds,
Oh, absolutely. So, Ray, I'm going to do something that I've never done on the podcast before, and that is because, to me, this is breaking news. Beep, 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 beep. Breaking news. I just got this on my phone, and this is something that you're going to want to hear about if you haven't heard about it already. So, apparently, as of a few hours ago, this article was put out by Bloody Disgusting. I guess Village Roadshow Pictures has partnered with the late George Romero's son, Chris Romero. Or is it Chris Romero? Is that his son?
I can't recall. I don't know. Let's say yes.
They are planning on rebooting the Night of the Living Dead franchise with Nikyatu Jusu as the director of the first film in the franchise. And Yusu said, "The original Night of the Living Dead is so resonant to this day. Every era has the zombie that it needs, and right now we need to treat zombies to reflect the way that humans treat each other and show who the monsters truly are." What are your thoughts on that, sir?
So, I'm excited because I do believe in that statement. I do believe that the old zombie was very, like, the old ways how zombie stories were told are very resonant of how people treated each other. So I do 1000% agree with that quote, that with horror, the way that it's going recently, how it's been more, horror has more of a message behind it now. This is a perfect time to do that. I am, as per usual, as one normally gets, reluctant to see a reboot of especially my all-time favorite movie. But, I would hope that the Romero estate understands and values the whole aspect of Romero's legacy. It does make me excited at the potential of us getting some form of adaptation of The Living Dead, which is the last book Romero wrote before he passed away. So I would be really excited to see that come to the big screen if that could become a possibility.
And this is also fascinating because I was just looking it up, and a director that they announced for this, Nikyatu Jusu, which I probably butchered that name, which I apologize, is looks like an African American woman, which would be really cool to see the perspective from a woman for that franchise. And apparently Her first film was a directorial debut horror movie called Nanny that was on Amazon Prime. It hasn't even been released yet. It comes out December 16th. And the plot description is an undocumented Senegalese for Senegal working as a nanny for an affluent Manhattan family hopes to bring her child she left behind to the United States, and it's classified as a horror film. So I will be jumping on board to watching that immediately to kind of get what her style is like and what that's going to feel like, because I agree with you, Ray. I think when you think about Night of the Living Dead, no one is ever going to remake that movie and make it the way George Romero did. It might never have that significant of an impact, but if you can do what she said in the article, and that is kind of shift what zombies are now and look at it through a different lens, I think that would be really cool to see the cultural relevance of zombies now and how we could apply, especially like with COVID and everything that we've dealt with over the past several years, how that could be applied to that type of an environment and make a really interesting film.
Well, and Romero, and who's to say they won't use some of Romero's like final ideas? Like I mentioned earlier, George Romero wrote a book called The Living Dead that came out like 3 years ago, and that book was like, you can tell that the ideas that are behind it are so solid, and they were just putting a mirror at society through a horror story. Unfortunately, Romero died while he was writing the book, so they hired another writer that had worked closely with Romero to finish the book, and it's a phenomenal book. I had a chance to read it, and yeah, Romero wasn't done having something to say about society as a whole through the lens of zombie stories. So I know that there are stories that are not yet on the big screen that they could easily.
I think it'll be really fascinating to see the perspective that they take. And, I try to be, and I think we've talked about this before, I try to be as open-minded as possible when it comes to this kind of thing because, like, I love the properties that I love for a reason, but I think it's always cool to see different people's interpretations and how that would come to the screen. And sometimes they really suck and they're not very good, but sometimes every now and again you get surprised. Like, I know it's a film we both really love, but the 2013 Fede Alvarez Evil Dead is absolutely incredible. And it doesn't take away from how amazing Sam Raimi's Evil Dead films are. It just adds something to the franchise that makes it more exciting, and it gives another movie to add into the rotation that you can be really excited about. And that's something I want. We both want more horror films that we can add into the rotation and that we can enjoy. And I'm really looking forward to this. And as soon as it popped up on my phone, I was like, God, a new Night of the Living Dead property. I have to bring this up with Ray because I want to hear what his perspective is. And I'm going to try to watch Night of the Living Dead, the original, before Halloween because I feel like I need to do it in tribute to my wonderful co-host.
Oh, that is my Halloween ritual, to watch it every Halloween to close out my spooky season. The only thing I will add about this whole thing is something that I feel like a lot of people, I don't know how many people have stopped to think about this, but Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead, which are the trifecta, the OGs of zombie movies, a lot of, like, those three movies, they have something in common. And don't get me wrong, there's phenomenal performances. Dwayne Jones is incredible as the lead, especially Night of the Living Dead. They're not a character-driven story, as in, like, it's not like you trying to replace Ash or trying to replace the Cenobites or trying to replace, there's no big shoes to fill. You just need to fill it in with a good story.
Exactly. And that's what Evil Dead 2013 does really well, is that it tells a great story, but it also introduces us. I think Jane Levy's character is amazing. I think she's a great final girl. And I think that what I love is like the transformation of her, and like how for the most of the film she is the villain, and then when she comes out of it, like, she's the hero. And I love that transformation, and it added something entirely new, and this is exciting. I think it's always really exciting to hear when people are going to do things like this. So speaking of hearing our opinions, that's what this whole podcast is about, is Ray and I's opinions and discussing things. And so we're coming out of the spooky season and into a new series of episodes that we want to discuss. And Ray and I thought that it would be a lot of fun to talk about directors that we love, and we want to kind of go back and forth and pick some directors. And so today we thought it would be amazing to start with one of the biggest horror icons, Mr. John Carpenter, who Ray and I both love quite a bit. And I wanted to start by asking you, Ray, what was your initial exposure to John Carpenter, and were you like me and wanted to like dive in and watch every movie that he ever made?
So it's really interesting with John Carpenter because my dad, his favorite genre is vampire movies. He loves vampire movies. He loves like Bela Lugosi and Salem's Lot and Nosferatu, obviously. He loves all that stuff. So vampire movies were always in the house. And we had a copy of John Carpenter's Vampires. I watched it when I was young. I think that was probably my first introduction to John Carpenter. But I had no clue what John Carpenter was. I just thought that was like a brand or something, because it was like John Carpenter's Vampires. So like at first I was looking for some character named John Carpenter, but no, like you never hear of a John Carpenter. And I was a little kid, so it's not like, oh, did you not pay attention to the director? Like I wasn't paying attention to any of that. So I just thought John Carpenter was some form of like producer or brand or something. I don't know what I was thinking, but I didn't think of like a director. So I remember watching that movie, and like it's not the greatest in his catalog, but I still have fond memories of it because of how innocent and naive I was when I watched it, thinking, oh, this is just kind of a silly vampire movie and I like it. And then I eventually started picking up other Carpenters, some of Carpenter's like other works. But honestly, I think when I became like a Carpenter fan was more through his music. And I don't know why I never made the connection that it was like, oh, he's scoring his own movies. But like I was like, man, just John Carpenter, dude, he's like a great composer. I love his music. And I don't know how I never made the connection. I was like, they're the same person, dude. But I feel like the music was a bigger intro for me.
No, that's a super cool thing too. And I love John Carpenter's music. And I think what I love about it is like, none of it is super complex, but I love how the simplicity of it really, it just makes it so catchy and easy to get into your head. And I've actually, interestingly enough, for this Halloween season in particular, I've been listening to the Fog score a lot. And I am really impressed. Like, you think of how iconic the Halloween score is, but the Fog is incredibly iconic. There's so many amazing tracks on that album, and it's just so amazing that John Carpenter, because like I went to film school, and you learn about like directing and cinematography and production, and the fact that on so many of these films that John Carpenter would not only like write his scripts but direct, sometimes produce, sometimes obviously doing the score. It's just insane to think that he wore so many hats, and it just shows how much that Carpenter loves what he does. And my initial exposure to Carpenter was actually when I was growing up. My parents loved Big Trouble in Little China, and so Big Trouble in Little China was the very first Carpenter movie I watched. And I was in the similar realm to you, Ray, where like I didn't know what directors were at that time, so I just watched that movie and I was like, oh, this is like a Mortal Kombat-esque action movie with like a lot of comedy in it, ridiculous designs and for costumes and the way the villains look, and I absolutely loved it as a kid. And then I think I must have been like 12 or 13 at the time, and my parents sat me down and we watched Halloween for the first time, and my parents made the comment like, this is the guy who made Big Trouble in Little China. And so I sat down and watched Halloween, and then as I grew up and started to appreciate film, that's when I really kind of broke out and started watching his other movies. And believe it or not, with how like intense John Carpenter's filmography is, I think I've only seen like 7 films in his catalog, which I know he has a ton, and I know that like towards the end of his career, like Ghost of Mars and The Ward, those aren't really like loved films, and even Vampires, which I know you enjoy, but I know it's not like a loved property of his. It's clear that like maybe there was more production interference in those, or maybe he just didn't have as much of a passion towards it as he used to. But there's something to be said about the fact that the man created not one, but like 5 of the most predominant horror films in history. I mean, you think between Halloween, The Fog, The Thing, Christine, even They Live a little bit, like with how iconic the stuff in They Live is, that he just really has made an impact on cinema, not just on horror, but on cinema as a whole. And I thought this would be really fun to just talk about our exposure to Carpenter, maybe some of our favorite films, some score elements we like, and yeah, I'm really excited to discuss this because I love John Carpenter.
Oh yeah, no, me too. And it's actually really interesting because when it comes to John Carpenter, I feel like I'm on the same boat where his filmography is so broad, and I've only seen a handful of them myself. So yeah, but there's something so interesting about what he did with the genre, because I feel like you have all of these directors that kind of become very like, you just kind of have an expectation of what they're gonna do, but I feel like John Carpenter just like, he's just his own thing. Like, he just knows how to direct a good horror movie, has great ideas, and I feel like even his lesser liked movies are still, at the very least, you can't say that they don't have a really good execution of at least the story or the writing. You know, there's always something of value in everything he does. I don't think, from the movies I've seen of his, at least, I've never seen a bad John Carpenter movie. At the very least, they have something different to provide to the table.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think it's probably the best way to start it off. When you think about Carpenter and his career, obviously his earliest two films are Dark Star and Assault on Precinct 13, which I actually haven't seen either one of those, but I've seen clips from Assault on Precinct 13 and know that kind of gives you the vibe where he was going with like Escape from New York and even elements from Big Trouble in Little China. But I think it's probably the best bet that we start by talking about the pinnacle of Carpenter's career, which is Halloween. And I think, you know, Halloween is one of the most iconic films ever made. I know I mentioned it before, but like, even though Black Christmas did the slasher genre elements before this film even existed, something about the way that Carpenter presented this story and the characters and just everything about it is so incredibly iconic. And I would also be remiss if I didn't bring up the wonderful Deborah Hill, who was a co-writer with John Carpenter, produced movies on this, The Fog, Escape from New York. I believe they were married for a while. And this movie, there's just something about it that really just bleeds atmosphere. And honestly, like, what I love so much about Halloween is you think about that incredibly iconic opening sequence where the Steadicam didn't even exist. There was a couple films that tried it, but the Steadicam, which I think this film, it was called the Panaglide. It was made by Panasonic, that gives you like that dream-like movement where the camera is hooked onto someone. They can walk, but it's not jarring like when you're watching a found footage film. And that scene of just like small Michael Myers working his way through the house, the way the lights cut on and off, just the POV view. It is one of the most iconic scenes in all of film history.
I was going to point that out, that when it comes to that one, there's something dreamlike about that whole movie, really. That first part, obviously, you know, you mentioned that camera style, but also like something about that movie feels very dreamlike throughout the runtime of the movie, because for a slasher movie, it's not very violent, actually. For at least by 2022 standards, it's not terribly violent. The body count is not that high, but there is something almost dreamlike about it. Even the sound design and the score, even though a lot of people, you know, he has the iconic Halloween theme, but I feel like the score is more dreamlike and ambient than tense horror.
And do you know that when Carpenter made that score, that he literally just sat with his keyboard next to the movie as it was playing and just literally watched the movie and played along with it until he hit something that he liked? It's incredible. You listen to him talk about it and it's just like he would watch the scenes and just play things out for how he felt like it was going to play out. And the thing is like, Halloween was announced, the production company approached John Carpenter and they said, hey, we want to make this horror movie about babysitters getting killed. And he was like, all right. right, I'll take the script, because he had so many other ideas that he wanted to do. So he sat down with Deborah Hill and they hashed out the script. And I think what's interesting, you think about like Robert Englund as Michael Myers, or even like Kane Hodder in the later Friday the 13th sequels, as like everyone saying, okay, this is this iconic person. But in the first Halloween, you have like Deborah Hill was in the Michael Myers costume at one point. I think there's 3 or 4 actors that played Michael Myers in this movie. It's really just a passion project of someone who's like, I want to make this film. Like, you think they shot this movie in Southern California, and they literally had bags of leaves that they would just throw out and like use a leaf blower to blow them around to make it look like fall. And there's something so charming.
Well, and something that people like a lot of people praise Halloween, and we talked about on previous episode of how beloved the franchise is by some, but I mean, I feel like people seem to forget that Halloween, the first one, it's essentially a low budget indie horror movie.
Exactly, that's all it is. And John Carpenter never wanted anything to exist past that. I mean, he didn't even direct Halloween 2. The production company had him come back and write a draft of the script, and that's when he was like, well, nobody's going to grasp onto this, because Michael Myers was just supposed to be the pinnacle of evil. So he's like, hey, we'll make Michael Myers Laurie Strode's sibling. And obviously, like, the sequels have spawned an either love or hate relationship for a lot of people. But I when you look at that movie on its own, it's just a really incredible film in the way that it was accomplished. It's suspenseful, it's atmospheric, it has really the young Jamie Lee Curtis performance is amazing. Donald Pleasance, for the little amount of time that he's in it, is incredible. There's just so much to praise about it. This actually got pointed out by I love Red Letter Media, and I was listening to them talk about this movie, and there's actually a scene where it's just the camera holding on the street with Laurie Strode's house, and if you pay really close attention, you can see John Carpenter from behind the camera blow cigarette smoke out, and it comes out the corner that he was chain smoking while they were doing the shot, and it always makes me chuckle every time I see it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he's just a wonderful human being. I love John Carpenter.
But that's the thing, though. I think that's what makes it so charming, that John Carpenter, like, and that's something that I love about him to this day. There's no ego about John Carpenter. He could easily just start throwing terms like auteur and, and rightfully so. I mean, he did reinvent a lot of the genre tropes. And I mean, back then, a composer / director, like, holy crap, that's unheard of. So no, he's just still a down-to-earth guy. It looks like, he loves to work with his family, especially now he's working with Daniel Davis and Cody Carpenter on scoring and performing. Like, there's nothing egocentric about him. He is just such a down-to-earth dude who just loves the craft.
I mean, and you look at directors that have been influenced about him that have been really open. You think about, like, Mike Flanagan has praised him, Michael Dougherty from Trick or Treat, Guillermo del Toro, Edgar Wright, James Wan, and even the great Bong Joon-ho has praised John Carpenter as, like, a huge influence into why he even wanted to make movies. And I think that the reason for that is really just kind of like the boots on the ground approach of, like, John Carpenter, when he's making a movie, he's making a movie. He wants to have creative control over the product, and I think that's why it turns out so great. So obviously we could rant about Halloween for an entire episode, but I think it's a perfect time to transition into the fact that 2 years later, the man made The Fog, which I think, and I don't know what your opinion is on The Fog, Ray, but I think The Fog is one of the most underrated in Carpenter's catalog.
Yeah, I would say so. I feel like even prior to me being more involved with Carpenter, I always heard the Halloween and the Thing being thrown around. I think those are his most at least successful films, at least, fame wise. I couldn't tell you money wise, but fame wise, I feel like people immediately go to The Thing or Halloween. And The Fog always kind of gets lumped somewhere at the bottom. And in fact, I don't think I even saw The Fog until recently. And by recently, I mean, maybe the last 5 years, because it was just so under my radar for such a long time. But it's also featuring another great performance from Jamie Lee Curtis. the man loves to use Jamie Lee for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And as I said before, I mean, this was produced and co-written by Deborah Hill, who was his romantic interest at the time. And yes, Jamie Lee Curtis is amazing. And then I want to shout out an incredible 70s and 80s horror icon, Mr. Tom Adkins, who I absolutely love. He was also in Halloween 3. He's great in this movie. And then how could we forget the incredible, the charming Miss Adrienne Barbeau, who I think probably steals the show in this movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not very well versed on the actors in this movie, but to your point, yeah, like there's not a single bad performance. There's nothing cheesy or hammy. Everyone does such a great job with the things that they're sharing and how they're portraying the characters. And again, that goes to speak about like how good of a writer and director Carpenter is. I mean, it's just like he knows how to surround himself with good talent, because he obviously saw something in Jamie Lee Curtis. He obviously saw something on what he was doing already. And he just, whoa. Janet Leigh is in The Fog? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just realized that.
Yeah, she's Kathy Williams. One of, I think, the most underrated performances in the film is Hal Holbrook as the minister, who just in the third act of this movie is absolutely one of the most pivotal elements to the entire film. And what I love about this is it feels almost like an episode of The Twilight Zone. It's such a simplistic premise, but the thing I love about this movie, and I think that I 100% would love to credit Mr. John Carpenter with the way that he creates atmosphere. And what we didn't talk about, the cinematographer in The Fog is Dean Cundey, who also worked on the original Halloween, one of my favorite cinematographers from that era in horror. And this movie just feels like cold fall just from the very first shot, and I feel like it puts you into the state of like you're watching a really amazing story be told, even from like Adrienne Barbeau's character being the radio show host out on that lighthouse recording studio that's just isolated from everyone, and the idea of like when the fog creeps up that these creatures are in there that are gonna come kill you. There's just something so horrifying about that, and I honestly just like love this movie. And I feel like every time I watch it, just like thinking about how simplistic the lore is, even from like the beginning of the film, it's just a guy telling a bunch of kids a story around a campfire, and like thinking that like a campfire tale can be elevated to this really amazing horror film with so many iconic shots and just like performances. I love The Fog. I could rave about it for an entire episode.
I love The Fog too. Like I said, this is one that I didn't see until later. But yeah, it's a great one, and I was actually fortunate enough to get like I found a mini like 4K box set of like it had The Fog and it had 3 other films, but I always enjoy like revisiting them. Waxwork, as you know, did an amazing like packaging for the repressing of it that I'm just obsessed with. So yeah, no, I'm with you. The Fog is great. It's definitely up there. But you haven't seen Escape from New York yet, have you?
No, and that's what I was about to transition into. And I think what's interesting about Escape from New York, which when I was doing a little bit of research for the episode, I thought this was interesting, that Escape from New York, John Carpenter co-wrote this with Nick Castle, who actually played Michael Myers in the original Halloween and in Halloween 2018 and Kills, which I thought was really interesting. But this has always been one that has been on my list because I love Kurt Russell, and I've heard like this is a movie that's touted as an action movie that isn't really an action movie because the action is all really sloppy and kind of goofy. But like I love Kurt Russell so much, I have a feeling that I would just adore this movie.
No, it's a fun time. I don't think this one is as cerebral or as like deep as The Fog, but it is still a great time. I mean, Kurt Russell, like he has this like I'm trying to remember, they inject on this thing on his neck, which these are these trackers, but it's so funny. You probably have seen like a thumbnail of the scene or something that he's getting injected in the neck, like 2 injections at the same time on the neck. I love it so much.
Yes, I've seen that. And I love his name, Snake Plissken, which is just like the most amazing, like just an absolutely amazing name for an icon in a movie.
Oh yeah, no, when I saw, I had to have a like have a double take. I was like, wait, really? It's like, oh yeah, that's good for you, man. You went for it.
I don't know if this has ever been said, but I have a feeling just from seeing images that Snake Plissken has to be what the guy from Metal Gear Solid was based off of.
Oh gosh, it has to be.
I just feel it. And I know that this movie, there's people that really love it and there's people that really hate it. I feel like I'd really love it. And then I know that years and years later that Escape from LA came out, and that is a critically hated film that I will eventually watch because I want to watch everything in Carpenter's catalog. But yeah, for some reason I've never got around to it, but I do have my John Carpenter scores, and every time I hear the Escape from New York music, I love it.
That's one that I'm missing. I need that Escape from New York score.
Yes, it's so good. So I've never seen Escape from New York, but what I can say is that right after, in 1982, John Carpenter released what I would argue is probably one of the greatest horror movies of all time. A lot of people don't understand is a remake, technically, The Thing.
Oh yeah, The Thing from Outer Space eventually remade into The Thing.
Which I don't know about you, Ray, but I truly think that this movie builds suspense and has that feeling of like isolation and dread of like, you know, not being able to contact people from the outside world with this threat that you don't even really understand. And this movie still, I've probably seen The Thing, I don't know, roughly 100 times in my life, and every time I watch this movie, it still unsettles me.
The Thing is a 10 out of 10.
100%.
No questions asked. I'm not sure if I would say it's my favorite Carpenter, but it's the movie itself, the film as a whole, is a 10 out of 10. From tension building, from the characters, from, all of that horror, but obviously production design and all the practical effects. It's like practical effect haven. It's such a good movie. And then once again, Kurt Russell comes in and just steals the show.
Also, cinematography from Dean Cundey, which I feel like Dean Cundey also worked on Escape from New York, but this movie, the cinematography plays such a heavy element into the film. I love the shadow work in this movie. I love, especially towards the third act, when they have like the flares lit and like the red is coming off of Kurt Russell's face when he's walking around. I feel like it's such a moody and atmospheric film that just looks so beautiful. But what I love about this movie is you are really uncertain the entire time about like who is infected by this thing, who is evil, who is good, and the entire time you're like in the back of your head like who can we trust other than Kurt Russell, which at the end of the day you really don't know whether you can trust Kurt Russell or not either. And that's what's so fascinating about this movie. And I think just truly from a writing perspective, John Carpenter really crafted just an amazing film by like making these characters all really interesting too. Like I really love how the beginning of this movie is really just like a big hangout where we're introduced to all these guys, and like Keith David is incredible in this movie. Probably one of my favorite people in the entire film. There's just so much in this movie that I can praise. And obviously you said the practical effects, which are just like bar none still some of the greatest practical effects of all time. I feel like even when you watch it now, that so much of it still holds up. It doesn't look dated. It doesn't look cheesy. And how they pulled off some of it is just absolutely amazing. And this is one of the few films that Mr. Carpenter did not want to do his own score, so somehow he swung one of the greatest composers of all time, Ennio Morricone.
Yeah, that threw me for a curveball, because when I was picking up, every time I find a Carpenter score for like a decent price, I will pick it up. And when I picked up The Thing, I was like, yeah, I have another Carpenter. Wait a minute, that's not Carpenter. But then like you look at the score and it's like John Carpenter's The Thing, composed by Ennio Morricone, and I'm like, that's not, if that isn't a name drop, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think too, because I mean, for an Ennio Morricone score, it's very simple. It's not like a really complex thing. It's more just like creating the atmosphere, because I feel like, you think about Halloween or The Fog, where the score is really brutal and in your face and really kind of accentuates the horror that you're seeing on screen, where this one is much more subdued and you're just kind of getting the intensity of what is happening in the film, where that Ennio Morricone score is really just keeping you immersed in that environment.
Oh yeah, for sure. And much like you, I love that score. I love that film. It will always be like one of the best in his catalog. Like I said, it's not my favorite Carpenter, but I can't deny that it is a 10 out of 10 for sure. There's nothing wrong with that movie.
It is my favorite Carpenter. So we've hit my favorite Carpenter movie is The Thing. I think that it's his, like Ray said, to me it's a 10 out of 10. It's a perfect movie. I love it more every time I watch it, and it's just incredible. And then after that, Mr. Carpenter in 1983 made a film that I feel like sort of begins to transition his career a little bit to where it's not all just horror focused, but there's a lot more comedy involved, a lot of things that, you know, kind of shift the dynamic in what we're used to from him, and that is Christine.
And which, you know, I know I've seen Christine, but I don't remember it, so I pretty much just claim that I haven't seen it because it's been so long that I couldn't really tell you much about it, other than that it's a killer car.
Yeah, and it's not really like a film that you have to spend a whole lot of time on. It's been years since I've watched it, but, you know, it's based on Stephen King, which I think this is like, you know, if anybody's going to take on doing a Stephen King adaptation, you're in good hands with John Carpenter. This one has some cheesier moments, some goofy dialogue, but it also has some really great horror elements that we're used to from Carpenter. And this is the first film that he steps away from Dean Cundey. Donald Morgan was the cinematographer for this one. And it's a really interesting film. It's not my favorite in his catalog from what I remember. It's been a really long time. But it's a really unique and entertaining film, and I feel like, you know, when you watch it, you know what you're getting yourself into, and you're gonna have a good time. And that's one thing that you can say for all of Carpenter's films is that, you know, when you get involved in it, that you're gonna have a good time. And that's, you know, there's not a lot of directors that I feel like you can 100% say that their movies are all fun, but Carpenter makes fun movies.
Yeah, I don't think there is any Carpenter movie that I would say, oh, that sucked. Like, and maybe there are, but so far I haven't seen them.
No, and then after Christine, and I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, Ray, but this was the film that John Carpenter got some nominations thrown for Academy Awards, which is one of the few times that Academy Awards have been thrown his way, and that is Starman.
I haven't seen it, no. I didn't even realize that he got nominated for it.
So he didn't get nominated, but Jeff Bridges got nominated for Best Actor.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I was just reading about that right now.
Yeah, so it's, you know, this movie I haven't seen since I was a really young kid, so I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot because I don't remember a lot about it, but I do remember it being a very, like, sweet film that it's, you know, it's portrayed as like more of like a family affiliated film, but there are some more adult elements throughout the movie as well. And from what I remember when I was younger, I really liked it a lot, but I don't remember intimate details about it, so I'm not going to stick on it for too long. But we can jump to the next film, which is what I said was my introduction to John Carpenter, which is Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh yeah, you did say that. This is another one that, much like Christine, I'm like, I know I've seen it. Do I remember it? No, I don't.
Yeah, so Big Trouble in Little China, in my opinion, is one of the weirdest films in Carpenter's catalog. I would compare this probably the most to They Live. Because it's mostly a really great action movie. There's a lot of really incredible action sequences. Kurt Russell does the like hero role so well. He's just so entertaining and charismatic and fun. And there's some really great effects in this movie. I mean, you know the way John Carpenter is. He ended up jumping back with Dean Cundey, who I keep referencing because he's just one of my favorite cinematographers. But this movie is one that, you know, there's not a whole lot specifically to talk about beat by beat, but it is so much fun as far as like just one of those movies that is kind of in the realm of like, you think like a Goonies or like Gremlins, or even go as far as like an Indiana Jones film, where you're just jumping into this world that is a super absurd premise that's really over the top and fun. But Ray, if you're gonna go through and watch one of the ones that you haven't seen in Carpenter's catalog, Big Trouble in Little China is one I'd really recommend you go watch, because I absolutely love it, and it is just, it's really different compared to a lot of his other films.
Yeah, again, it's one of those that, like, I want to say I have seen it, but I don't remember it. I feel like beyond this, from this point on, like, I've seen maybe like 2 more of his movies.
I agree. And so that's what I was going to say. The next one in his catalog is Prince of Darkness, which I've never seen. I don't know. Have you ever seen it?
I don't. I own a copy too, and I just haven't seen it yet.
But you have seen the next film that he made, which is the 1988 film They Live.
Which They Live, I will admit, is not a better movie, but it is my favorite Carpenter.
I love They Live, but it is not my favorite Carpenter movie, but I still have such a respect for what John Carpenter was doing as far as like commentating on capitalism and just like the way our society works as a whole. I think it's done so in a way too that's not like really hammy and over the top. It's just so much fun, and I love like the way that this whole idea of when our lead character Mr. Roddy Piper starts wearing these sunglasses and sees like the true identity of these aliens. It's such a weird movie, but it works. And it's crazy to me that it works so well with it being such a wild, weird movie. And we also have the return of Keith David, which is always exciting to see Keith David in a movie. He's great in this.
Yeah, no, and I love this one, but like I was saying, like I will admit The Thing is a better movie, but I just find myself enjoying this one more, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, 100% get that. I feel like that's that way for a lot of people when you think about movies in general. I mean, there's a lot of people, you know, like with Halloween Ends just being released, you have a lot of people releasing their Halloween ranked lists, and things are all over the place. And I think that certain movies just connect with people differently. But They Live, I 100% understand why this would be someone's favorite Carpenter movie. It just has such like a interesting tone. I love how it starts, and that like Roddy Piper's just kind of like drifting, and it's just like, I'm gonna go get this job doing this random shit, and it's just like the way you're introduced into this whole world is so strange.
Oh no, and then you have that 5-minute long fight scene.
Yes, it's so good. And I love the setting of this. I love how weird and like industrial it is where they're staying. Like it's almost like a weird like shanty town.
Oh yeah. But it's also downtown LA in the 70s.
Exactly. It's so weird. Like just like the way that you're introduced to these characters, and I don't know. I love how the aliens are introduced, and how the really intense part of the action in this film doesn't really start until the third act.
Yeah, no, I feel like the first 2 acts are very tame, and then you get these like wild third act. And another thing I did love about this movie too is how like Roddy Piper, one of my favorite quotes, but also one of the most random moments. You know, I feel like a lot of people quote that, like, I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. Like everyone quotes that. But like if you watch that movie, he just randomly wanders into this bank and starts shooting the place after saying that. Like it just happens in such a weird, bonkers way. But you just love it.
Exactly. And I think that's the best part about that movie, is it's so weird and unique. But it's like, it's one of those things where like the chaos ensues and you can't look away.
Oh yeah. No, there was no way I could look away. And I do really love the creature design of those aliens. I really do love the way they look.
Oh, so do I. It's so unique, and I feel like, you know, there's been a lot of artists this day and age that have kind of like taken the signs from there, like the consume and obey and all that, and applied it to their own art. And so it really goes to show, just like even at this point in Carpenter's career, how impactful what he was making is on society.
I will admit that the final shot of that movie is by far one of the funniest things I've seen.
Oh, dude. Yes, I 100% agree with you. It is
What's wrong, baby?
I want to rewatch They Live. I recently, I think it was last year around Christmas, my family got me the Blu-ray box set that has the 7-inch in it.
Oh, from the Shout Factory?
Yeah, I love it so much. I love this movie a lot, and I feel like this is the film. There's another film, obviously we're going to let you talk about vampires, but this is the period in Carpenter's career where I would say his films kind of started to go downhill as far as the critical reception of his films. Like the next movie he put out was the Chevy Chase movie Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which I have seen like 15 minutes of it on TV, and I was like, no, I will probably give it a chance because I loved Chevy Chase when I was growing up. But I do want to mention, because Ray, I don't know if you've ever seen it before, but this is the last film in Carpenter's catalog that I have seen personally, and I just watched it for the first time this year, and that is In the Mouth of Madness.
You know, it's funny. I actually started watching In the Mouth of Madness, and I made it about maybe like the first act. And then I had to turn it off. It just something came up and I turned it off. And literally went back to watch it the next day, and they had taken it down from the streaming service.
You need to watch this one because this movie pays a really heavy homage to Lovecraft, and I know how much you love Lovecraftian movies. But this movie...
it's a blatant reference to In the Mouth of Madness.
Exactly, yeah. But
not in the mouth. Sorry, at the Mountain of Madness. Sorry.
And Sam Neill really gives an amazing performance in the movie. But this is also like obviously poking fun at Stephen King, and they actually shout out Stephen King in this, which I thought was pretty cool. But this whole movie is about this author Sutter Kane, who is essentially like this world's Stephen King, and Sam Neill is like a freelance insurance investigator, and this publishing company reaches out to him because they say that Sutter Kane has disappeared and that he's about to release this new book, but because of the terms of his contract, like things are a little dicey and they need him to track him down. Well, he's trying to figure out where he would go, and there's this like fake place that he writes about called Hobbs End in all of his books, and there's this really incredible scene, Ray, where like Sam Neill's like losing his mind and he cuts all the covers off of the books and ends up drawing a map of New Hampshire with the books. It's so wild. So he ends up finding out where he's at, and then randomly, because it's a early 1990s movie, the attractive secretary has to go with him to this place to track down Sutter Kane. So they get there, and when they get there, the world that they're in is literally a world that is created based off all of his works of literature. And so there's all these creatures and all these weird things that happen, and it's really like... I don't want to make it sound juvenile, but it's really sort of like if John Carpenter made a Goosebumps episode. Not in a cheesy way. Like, it's much more, maybe I guess Fear Street would have been the better thing to say. Because it's still Carpenter. It's horrifying. There's insane visual imagery in it. It's very disturbing, but it just has that kind of feel, like driving to this sleepy fall town where all this weird shit starts happening. And Sam Neill plays Lunatic really well, and I just watched this for the first time this year. I thought it was so much fun, and this is the last film in Carpenter's catalog that I have seen, which came out in 94, and then he made Village of the Damned, which I've never seen, Escape from LA, and then after that in 1998 he put out Ray's introduction to Mr. Carpenter, which is Vampires.
And I saw this movie a long time ago when I was a little kid, so I don't remember much of it. I do remember James Woods as like the main like vampire hunter, and like, I mean, James Woods is ridiculous to begin with, and I love him for it. Don't get me wrong, I don't say that in like a bad way. James Woods is crazy in the right kind of way.
He's crazy in the right kind of ways as an actor, but as a lunatic conservative in real life, he's a moron. It's difficult because I love Videodrome so much. So there's a lot of performances in James Woods' career that I love. But what I will say, and one of the things about Vampires, and I've never seen it, it stars my beloved Cheryl Lee from Twin Peaks, Miss Laura Palmer. And I have never seen this movie, and it's always been on my list because she's in the film.
Well, and the interesting thing about Vampires, though, is that, yeah, like, I just remember it being very generic. Like, it's a generic vampire movie, for sure. But I don't know, there was something so, like, because I have more memories of like my experience watching it than the movie itself, because I remember my dad being like, oh, this is a vampire movie and it's a John Carpenter movie, and I'm just like, I don't know what that means, but you're excited about it. And I just kind of have a fond memory of it because I just remember my dad being so excited to share this movie with me and to introduce me to a part of his world that it just kind of, I look back at it in fondness. You know, it's one of those situations where like I vaguely remember the movie, but I do remember that excitement that my dad had as he's showing me this movie.
And now you're like, I'm an adult man, and I totally understand why he was this excited about it. Because now we geek out about it.
We geek out about, yeah, and now I totally get why there's like 2 episodes from Family Guy completely devoted at making fun of James Woods.
Yeah, oh, yes. But I've never seen vampires, and then Carpenter finished out his career by making Ghosts of Mars, which I know has not been critically well received, and then in 2010 he made The Ward, and unfortunately that was the last film that Mr. Carpenter made. I don't know about you, Ray. I doubt that he'll ever make anything else. I don't feel like he's got it in him.
I think with directors like Carpenter, I don't think, because I feel like it was a similar situation with George Romero, where George Romero was so set in his ways that his horror was very effective in like the 60s and 70s, but by the time he reached like modern technology, he was still so stuck on the way how he wanted the stories to be told that they didn't translate as well with a younger audience. And I feel like Carpenter is sort of has reached that where, but I think unlike Romero, I think he understands that. I think he understands his ideas are probably not going to connect with a younger audience. So, and you know, we geek about all these directors, but ultimately, like, it is still very much a business, and they still need to make money. And if they're going to create something that's not going to make them any money, then it's probably not the most financial responsible thing that they can do. So I don't think it's not that he doesn't have them in him. I think he just probably understands that his storytelling and his vision just isn't going to connect with modern audiences.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. But I think what's funny is, like, what John Carpenter's like in his 70s now. I don't know if you've read about it. Did you know that he's like a huge video game nerd?
Really?
Yeah, like he is a diehard video game nerd, and he is like begging people to like let him score their video games. Like he wants to do it. So, like he said that he's obsessed with Fallout 76 and Borderlands.
What?
Which like blew my mind. If you read about it, it's really interesting. Like he said that no one has ever asked him to score his video game, and that he really wants to score a video game, and that he's hoping that someone will reach out to him. He said that his biggest frustration this year was that he got stuck on one part of The Last of Us 2 and he couldn't get past it, and so he just gave up. But I think, you know, it's like we said at the beginning of the episode, and I think this reigns true for us throughout most of the filmmakers that we'll talk about on this podcast platform. The thing that's so lovable about John Carpenter is he just feels like a guy. Like, he feels like someone I'd love to go grab dinner with or something sometime and just talk to. Like, he doesn't... The thing that's so different about directors than actors is that there's something so human about them and so, like, down to earth, where I feel like a lot of actors let the fame get to their heads. And Carpenter just seems like the coolest dude who you could just hang out with and really just, like, learn a lot from.
Well... Not only that, but like I feel like even with some directors, like, you know me, I love Christopher Nolan. I hope I never meet him in real life. He looks like a complete pompous.
He doesn't let you sit during... Remember, he doesn't provide chairs. He doesn't let you sit in between takes.
Right, and then you have like Villeneuve, who seems like a legitimately nice guy, but he looks so refined and so almost intimidating. But then you look at Carpenter and you're like, I would totally like invite you out for a drink and just let you talk my ear off.
He's always in like a long black shirt and blue jeans.
Yeah,
like,
he's just
New Balance. Ray, you guys could go to like a Dollar General and pick up a payday together.
There you go.
Carpenter, you want to grab a payday with me, bro? Like, it sounds like a great time. But no, all joking aside, like, I think we both have a really amazing love for John Carpenter. And just talking about his filmography now, it's funny because I know that we like haven't seen all of his movies, but I want to watch more. Like, there's so many things about him that just intrigue me, that make me want to just dive fully into his catalog.
So real quick, what would be like the next three, just real quick, you don't even have to say why, just the next three that you want to put at the forefront for you?
Well, number one, 100% is Escape from New York, because I've literally had so many people hounding me a million times saying, watch Escape from New York, watch Escape from New York. But I would say probably off the cuff, Escape from New York. I'd love to rewatch Starman, and I really want to see Prince of Darkness because I've heard a million great things about it. How about you?
Definitely Prince of Darkness, In the Mouth of Madness, and you know what? I actually haven't seen Big Trouble. So throw it in there.
Yeah, he just has so many great movies, and I really wanted to mention, I collected a couple of facts about Carpenter because I thought that this was really interesting. So do you know that him and Deborah Hill wrote Halloween in 10 days? They shot the movie in 20 days, and he made the score for it in 3 days.
Ridiculous.
He wrote the most iconic films, like the most iconic horror film score in 3 days.
That's just disgusting.
Yeah. So I guess John Carpenter wrote another fun thing. John Carpenter wrote the chew bubblegum and kick ass line for They Live, but I guess in every interview he's ever done, he refuses to take credit for it because he said, I wrote it, but like I never thought that Roddy Piper's delivery would be as amazing as it was. And he's like, now I just tell everybody that Roddy Piper just made that up.
Which,
because he said I can't really like take credit for something that is so incredible.
Oh.
And then the last thing, which I thought was really interesting, is he constantly gets asked all the time what his favorite genre of films are, and people always think it's like horror or fantasy or something. But he said his favorite genre of films is westerns. And
which actually that makes kind of sense.
He wrote a script in the late 70s called Blood River that he wanted to be a John Wayne movie, and apparently some production company ended up picking it up and made it into like a made-for-TV movie in the 1990s.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I just thought those would be a couple of little fun facts about Carpenter because we both love him a lot. And yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this, Ray. I think it's really cool to just kind of like dive into a director's filmography. And obviously, you know, we mentioned it, but we both have a fond love for John Carpenter's music, and all those films have amazing scores. And I guess this is just Ray and I saying, go check out John Carpenter's filmography. I know we shouldn't really even have to say that because he's such an iconic person, but yeah, go check out his movies. They're just so amazing.
Well, and also check out his music, not just the scores, but he does do like just standalone music under just his name, John Carpenter, and he has the Lost Themes 1, 2, and 3 that are incredible. You should be checking them out.
He was also in a band called the Coupe de Villes.
Oh, look at that. And he actually does a lot of work with his son and Cody Carpenter and son-in-law Daniel Davis, both of them incredible musicians on their own merit as well. I have quite a handful of stuff from Daniel Davis. He's a talented composer. So, yeah, like check out everything surrounding, Mr. John Carpenter.
Absolutely. And that was a blast. And Ray, I know normally this is the point in the episode where we would do what we watched this week, which there's still a film I do want to mention that I watched this week because I think it's funny.
We can still do that segment. This won't take very long.
But I am ready for whatever new thing you'd like to throw my way. So hit me with it.
I'm not going to call it a new thing because I don't think it's going to be something we're always going to do. I was driving home today and I had this question pop up and I was like, I wonder what Nate's answer would be. I wanted to ask you, what are, just really briefly, what are 2 films that you refuse to watch? And what I mean by refuse, I don't mean like, oh, it looks stupid, or, oh, it's another movie in the freaking, Twilight franchise. No, I'm talking about like a legitimate reason why 2 films that you refuse to watch.
Well, I guess the first one might be breaking your rules a little bit, but I refuse to watch the film Yoga Hosers.
Why? Because you love Tusk so much? You don't want it to be tampered with?
I hate Kevin Smith Not as a person. He's probably a totally fine human being. I think that he's one of those people that he tries so hard to be funny. Like, his movies just, like, feel like that he's really just trying so hard. And there's something about it that just comes off as really obnoxious. And so obviously I'm doing this thing where I'm watching all the A24 movies and I get to Tusk and I'm like, well, I don't really have a choice. I have to watch this movie. And then I found out that that was the sequel to it. And I was like, yeah, there's no way in hell I'm ever gonna watch this movie because it's just absolutely abysmal. And then there is one other film that does not break your rules, that is a film I will never watch, and that is a Serbian film.
That Serbian film is also on my list.
Yeah, I will never watch a Serbian film, and the reason why I will never watch a Serbian film is because it is a movie that exists for no artistic value. It literally just exists to show as many disgustingly disturbing things as possible. I've read enough about it to kind of get the idea as to what happens in it, and I've seen one scene, unfortunately, that someone wanted to show me, and I'm all for extreme horror. I love the French extreme horror movement. I think there's a lot of really great movies. You look at a movie like Martyrs, which is absolutely incredible. There's a lot of films like that explore this idea of extreme violence while also grappling other themes, but that just seems a movie that exists to be sick and gross, and I'm not a fan. Not something that I want to take a part of.
I was intrigued because a Serbian film would be number one on my list as well.
Yeah, that's my number one. The Yoga Hosers is just because I don't like that. And then pretty much any conservative propaganda documentary.
Oh yeah, those aren't films.
Yeah, but for the most part, I would say I'm normally, like, even with Yoga Hosers, I know I made a joke about it, but, like, I'm normally pretty open-minded enough to watch things, but when it comes to something like that seems really vile and gross, and, like, that it just crosses a line that I think, like, shouldn't be crossed. What about you, other than a Serbian film?
Cannibal Holocaust.
I'll watch Cannibal Holocaust at some point. It's actually been on my list for a really long time. Is there a specific reason why?
Yeah, the animal deaths are real.
Oh, are they seriously?
Yeah, there's a scene where they kill a turtle. They really did kill the tortured and kill the turtle on screen.
Oh, that's wild. That's similar to the chicken that got killed in Pink Flamingos.
Oh, really? Yeah. So then I couldn't watch Pink Flamingos then.
Yeah, there's a chicken that it doesn't show the chicken die in the movie, but John Waters said in an interview that it died, but he's like, I'm not into animal abuse. He said we ate the chickens afterwards because he's a sadistic fucker. But like, no, I totally understand with your love of animals how that's something that, and obviously Cannibal Holocaust was before the film industry probably had stricter regulations on animal treatment. So yeah, I'm sure that's probably pretty brutal then.
There's also a movie, I haven't seen it, but it's a film by Tchaikovsky. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Tarkovsky?
Tarkovsky, yeah, where he actually like set the horses on fire.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I wonder what movie that is, cuz we talk about Stalker a lot in film school. And there's another Tarkovsky film that was mentioned a lot, but I have never heard anybody talk about that. But that's really wild.
Yeah, like basically any movie that has any form of real animal abuse, I'm just not into it at all.
It looks like the movie is called Andrei Rublev.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, I just looked it up because that's not even a movie that I've heard mentioned in his catalog before. So that's
the only reason why I know is because I was looking at his catalog because I wanted to pick up some stuff from during one of the Criterion sales, and I came across that one, and honestly the cover just looked cool. I was like, this looks like a cool cover, so I started doing some research. I was like, nope, this is not for me.
3 hours and 25. Oh, well, it says that the reason why they did that is the crew acquired a horse from a slaughterhouse that they were going to shoot it the next day.
Yeah,
so the horse was going to die. Yeah, it's but just so you know, it's not like the man's into animal torture.
probably dead.
Yeah, well, he is dead now. But no, it's always interesting, and I think that probably exists for a lot of people, is that the whole idea of like not watching something that kind of pushes your own moral boundaries. That makes sense. I mean, you should never force yourself to watch something that you don't want to see, and if it makes you question like your own belief system, or obviously like someone like you who has such a passionate love for animals, why would you subject yourself to something that's going to make you like feel sick about that? So
yeah, even as a vegetarian, I still don't watch a lot of those PETA documentaries.
yeah. And you look at someone like me who, you know, we've been doing this podcast for a while, Ray. You've known me for a while. I'm a pretty sadistic fuck, and I won't watch Serbian film.
Well, I mean, you gotta have some boundaries, man.
Yeah, I have to have at least one. I mean, at least one thing that I won't watch. But no, I really liked that, Ray. That was a really good question. I feel like that kind of caught me off guard a little bit. I like that a lot.
All right, so without further ado, you said you wanted to bring up a movie you've checked out?
Yeah, so I have to bring this up because it's going to give you a good laugh. Okay. I have to tell you about one of my favorite horror movies of the entire year.
Oh no.
One of my favorite horror movies of the entire year is Terrifier 2.
Oh my gosh, of course.
Yeah, so I have never in my life watched a film where it feels like the first movie was like a complete misstep. Like they just had no idea what they were doing. This movie, in my opinion, will probably cement itself in the next 10 years as a horror classic. This is one of the first movies I think I've watched in this decade that feels like something out of the 1980s. Like, feels like it. The tone and the atmosphere, and also, I would highly recommend you listen to the score first. The score is... Yes, before you watch the movie, because I know you hated the first movie, just like I did, and I still hate the first movie. It has not changed my opinion on it, but the score is from this guy named Paul Wiley. It is an incredible synth score. I think you will absolutely love it. I'm still waiting. I guess some production company pressed the original Terrifier score, which, from what I remember, was not that memorable.
I don't remember. I was just going to ask him, like, was there even a score on that one?
Yeah, some company pressed it, so I'm hoping they pressed this one. But Ray, the practical effects in this movie are bar none the closest to, like, The Thing, or like one of those amazing 1980s practical effects sequences. And I have to tell you about one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because I know it will sell you to watch it. So... This mother gets killed in the movie. The clown shoots her in the face, literally blows a gaping hole in her face. So he sets her up at the dinner table. The son comes into the house. He walks out with an apron on and starts spoon feeding the gaping hole in her face mashed potatoes.
What in the world, Nate?
It is hilarious. And the thing is like, you know, the whole idea behind that Art the Clown thing was that he was this really sadistic character in the first movie, but they didn't really play into it enough to like understand his background. This movie plays into like why he is as crazy as he is, and also the final girl in this, one of the most badass characters I've ever seen in a movie. They actually write great characters in this. It's a really fascinating story. I would probably watch this movie 2 or 3 more times this year. That's how much I loved it. And I'm like literally hitting myself in the back of the head about it because of how much I hated the first one. But this is probably one of my favorite horror movies released all year.
I'm going to have to watch it, aren't I?
Are you shocked?
I have to watch it, aren't I?
Yes, because you're gonna love it. There's the whole third act sequence is set at this like carnival, and it is amazing. Like the production design in this, the fact that they were able to pull off this movie on such a small budget. You know how we talk about that kill in The Prowler all the time, where they do a practical effect kill in this where he like smashes a bottle into some guy's face, and it's clearly like a prop dummy head, but the eyeball is blinking and the mouth is still moving while his face is crushed. And I was like, it really brought me back to like those Tom Savini practical effects from the 1980s. And it's all practical. I was reading about it online. They don't do any CGI stuff. It's all practical effects, which like, I know there was this whole thing about people puking in the theater and getting like all sick. It's nothing different than like a Maniac or the Prowler. Like the visual effects are the same. It really is like something from a different era, and I just respect the hell out of this movie, and I loved it a lot.
Do I get some stupid scene where he's on the ground and the character is screaming at him, "Get up! Get up!" Oh my gosh, I wanted to shoot myself.
Oh, God. No, you don't. There's no stupid scenes like that in this movie. And take it from a person who thought the first movie was, like, absolutely abysmal. There's so many funny scenes, though. There's, like, a scene where he's sitting in a waiting room while he's washing the blood out of his clothes, and he's reading the newspaper, and the newspaper says, 4-car pileup, multiple families dead, and he just starts laughing. There's a lot of, like... But it's really well done. It really pulls out that, like, sadism and that, like, you know, the things that make these slasher icons so interesting. And I'm really glad I liked this movie so much because we're in need of a new horror icon. And, man, is his makeup and stuff so cool.
That is one thing I did like about the first one. It was, like, his makeup and character design is really cool.
But this movie, so awesome, Ray. I promise you, even if you don't love it, you're really going to like it. There's a lot of hallmarks in movies that I know you love that I think you'll really appreciate it a lot. That's the movie I'm going to mention this week. What would you like to mention?
I'm going to mention that, you know, while we're talking silly, I'm going to stay on the air, on the side of silly, of a movie that I didn't watch this week. I watched it a couple of weeks ago, but it features a cameo from John Carpenter, and that is the Foo Fighters movie Studio 666.
I have not seen this movie, but I have heard a lot of people say that it was incredibly enjoyable and fun. And so I'm going to have to check it out just for that reason.
It's enjoyable and fun, and some awful acting.
I figured as much.
But it's enjoyable and fun. That's the thing about that movie is I watched it with a group of friends, and it was just like we were just laughing the whole time. Like, we were just laughing. It, you know, it's kind of cheesy. You can tell it's low budget. Some of the effects are kind of rough, but on that same vein though, like, it's enjoyable because, you know, love them or hate them, Dave Grohl and all the guys in Foo Fighters are likable dudes. They're all a bunch of likable guys. They're fun to watch. You know, rest in peace, Taylor Hawkins. Like, they're such fun and charismatic people that even if the acting isn't great, like Pat Smear is just the best part of that movie. But like for the wrong reasons, but for the right reasons at the same time. It's a fun movie. It's not definitely. I mean, anybody could have told you not to take a movie seriously featuring the Foo Fighters.
How's that John Carpenter score?
Well, he doesn't score it. He just did the main theme. He didn't score the whole thing, just the theme.
Oh, that was it, just the theme?
He just did the theme song for it, which was great as per usual. I love his cameo.
I bet it's awesome just to see him show up in it.
Yeah, it's just like he has like 2 lines, but it's just a quick cameo of his. He's their producer, helping them produce the new album.
That's awesome. I love it.
But yeah, it's great, and it's like a fun time. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you this amazing thing. It's just a dumb fun movie.
Well, and sometimes that's exactly what we need is a dumb fun movie. So I appreciate the recommendation, Ray. I'll have to check that out now because I honestly was interested in it when I saw the poster because it just looked like some guys having fun. And I'm all for that. I'm all for that. If you're making a movie just because, you know, the pure enjoyment factor, then I'm all for it.
I mean, it's a short story by Dave Grohl.
Oh, that's cool. Then I'm definitely going to check it out. So that's what we watched this week. Ray and I just wanted to bring up a movie really quick and talk about it. And next week, we're going to talk about another director. This director, we chose John Carpenter together this week. But next week, Ray has chosen a director that he would like to talk about. And who is that director, sir?
Oh, he's all good. He represents all good things. He's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite modern director. And his name is Denis Villeneuve.
And I'm very excited to talk about Denis Villeneuve because I've actually recently watched a couple more of his films. I'm going to try to get as many in from him as I possibly can before the episode. But I've seen enough that I can at least be a part of the conversation with Ray. Ray, have you seen his whole catalog now?
No, I'm missing 2. I'm missing
but see, that's-
I'm missing the first two.
But see, that's better than me. I'm missing more than that. So I'm going to try to watch as many of them as I possibly can because I think Denis Villeneuve is incredibly talented. I watched my favorite Denis Villeneuve movie as of right now is probably 2049.
That's my favorite. The 2049 is not only my favorite Villeneuve movie, but it's also like one of my favorite movies if not my favorite movie of the last decade.
I will say that it became one of my favorite movies of all time, probably in my top 20 very quickly.
Easily.
It's incredible, and I can't believe it didn't do as well as it did, and I'm sure I'll love Dune just as much. So we're going to talk about Denis Villeneuve. So similar to the John Carpenter episode today, you don't have to have seen all of his movies, but if you want to check some of them out so you can understand a little bit more what we're talking about when we get into it, go watch some of his filmography. Check it out. It's always cool, so that way you can be a little bit more in tuned when we talk about more specifics. We try not to give like big spoilers away. We'll obviously, if we give a spoiler away, we'll let you guys know ahead of time. But yeah, just check out Villeneuve's work, and we'll talk about that on the next episode. As always, if you want to follow us at the Film Monsters Podcast on Instagram, we're always posting updates about the new episodes. We obviously just did the 31 Wax Hauntings Challenge. It was so much fun to see so many people. And Ray, I'm thinking about setting up something for Christmas time because I just had so much fun watching that and being a part of it. And I think that it would be cool, even if it's not for the full month, to do something around the week of Christmas. Because, I know there's a lot of great Christmas soundtracks, probably not enough to fill a full month, but it would be fun to just do something else like that in the vein of the 31 Wax Hauntings Challenge, because I just thought it was so cool to interact with people who listen to the podcast.
Yeah, that would totally be a good time. 1000%. I'd be down with that.
Yeah, so we'll talk that over once we get closer to the time period. But we always appreciate you guys. Obviously, you could follow myself at My Exit Unfair and Ray at Analog C to see our personal posts. Obviously, you guys know we post film-related content, movie-related content. We just enjoy getting stuff out there for you. And we always appreciate you guys for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.